but did add 12 assists to become the 13th player in NBA history with 1,000 career playoff dimes. And of course, there's Devin Booker. Also had an off night shooting the ball in this first game, wearing the mask. He shot 1 for 7 when Patrick Beverley was his primary defender. Paul George has scored 25 points in 8 straight games, the second longest streak in Clippers playoff history, and one behind the great Bob McAdoo's franchise record. There it is. It's game time. Let's go. Game 4 of these Western Conference Finals comes down to not Paul George like a lot of people believe. It may very well come down to Patrick Beverley and Terrence Mann going up against Devin Booker and CP3. In Game 3, Devin Booker held to 5 for 21 shooting. Chris Paul held to 5 of 19 shooting. That's 10 for 40 shooting, 30 missed shots. And without question, that's exactly what led to the Suns' defeat in Game 3. The Los Angeles Clippers are looking to duplicate that effort in Game 4. To even this series at 2-2. And without question, no matter what we think about Paul George and what he's capable of doing, in the end, it's going to come down to whether or not those two dudes, Beverley and Mann, can defend the way that they did in Game 3. It's really, really that simple. Now for our team reports, we'll start off with Dave McMenamin.
After scoring 40 points in Game 1 of the Western Conference Finals, Devin Booker has only combined for 35 in Games 2 and 3. Now, he said part of that has been the defense of Patrick Beverley, who he claimed has been ultra-aggressive on him, but he also said he has to do a much better job of getting to his spots. Suns coach Monty Williams said Phoenix can help Booker out by playing with more pace than they did in Game 3 because Booker, with space around him in the open court, is as devastating an offensive player as exists in today's game. Now for a report on the Clippers, let's go to Om Youngmisoo.
We saw Kawhi Leonard sitting high up at a Staples Center suite during Game 3, but that doesn't mean he's just lounging around. Leonard has been very active behind the scenes, visiting the locker room and even the coaches' room at halftime of games, providing intel on what he's seeing. Paul George talked to Leonard after Games 1 and 2 and discussed things like rotations, when to drive, and the defensive attention George is receiving. Ty Lue recently told me he has seen a more vocal Leonard try to lead his team this postseason. Back to you, Stephen A.
Thanks, Om. Mike Wilbon, the Hall of Famer. Kendrick Perkins, the champion. Both of you are with me right now. Mike Wilbon, when we think about Game 3, we think about Booker and CP3 and what happened with them. What happened with them in Game 3? Devin Booker. How were they able to be defended like that, Devin Booker and CP3?
Rust, a mask, and hellacious defense. That's the formula. Okay. I mean, and you can start wherever you want. I mean, Devin Booker now has had a day and a practice to get accustomed to that mask. I mean, we know Rip Hamilton tried to talk him through some of the finer points of mask wearing. A lot of people thought, I know Jeff Van Gundy said this very pointedly before the game, that Chris Paul will be Chris Paul, but maybe not right away.
Right.
And he was completely right about that. We expect to see somebody closer to the Chris Paul in the second half and even earlier in the previous series tonight. But also that defense, Stephen A.
Yeah,
you mentioned it. I mean, those guys played great defense. I don't expect for that to change. So there's going to have to be some creativity on the part of Monty Williams, who we know can be that. And also on the part of Chris Paul for getting himself and Devin Booker to the spots that Booker spoke of.
Perk, how do you feel about that? Do you feel a duplicate performance could be put in Game 4 relative to what transpired in Game 3 against CP3 and Booker?
Well, I'm with Mike Wilborn on one of those parts as far as with CP3 shaking the rust. But look, hey, listen, they got to find a way to get Devin Booker open, all right? Because right now, Patrick Beverley is on his heels like a pair of church socks. I hear him screaming first team all defense so loud, I got to put earplugs in my ear, and I'm watching the game from the house. Listen, he has to find a way to get going. Run him off of pin downs. Having Ayton and Crowder setting better picks. Stephen A., you called him the second coming of Kobe Bryant. Kobe Bryant was dropping 30 pieces with face masks.
I'm thinking about the rust that CP3 came into Game 3 with, right? And I'm thinking about Cameron Payne and how he had 29 points, 9 assists in 37 minutes without a single turnover in Game 2, but he was only able to play 4 minutes in Game 3 due to that ankle injury. Wilbon, you and I were watching him out here. He looks pretty healthy and ready to go. What kind of help do you think that will provide for CP3 and Booker in this game?
Well, first of all, remember, Monty can play them together.
Right.
He can, particularly that sort of takes care of the notion of the Clippers just going small and having some great advantage. They wouldn't. Cameron Payne, you and I have been watching him constantly. He's shooting deep threes like he had been effective on in the previous series in these playoffs. Going to the basket. I mean, he looks, there's nobody guarding him yet.
Right.
He looks pretty good right now. So they got to be encouraged about that after that 4-minute performance of the night. That's not going to get it, particularly when Chris Paul is still sort of playing his way back into his form.
Perk, what about you with that point I brought up about Cameron Payne? Real quick, what's your answer to that?
Well, he's going to help tremendously. I think when you look at their bench scoring, for us with the Phoenix Suns, he's their go-to guy. Monty Williams has done a great job of actually implementing him as the six-man candidate. And with him going out in Game 3, I thought it hurt Phoenix tremendously. Him coming back in Game 4, this is why I got the Suns winning tonight, because of campaign help.
Wow. That's why I brought him up, because I'm thinking that he's got that kind of impact, and that's going to help CP3 and Booker to make sure they don't look the way that they look in Game 3. We shall see. Coming up, the Bucks turn the heat up on Ice Trae and the Hawks. What this means for Atlanta in Game 3. Plus, with Kawhi out, we take a look at Paul George's evolving game with the pressure turned up this postseason in the latest Off the Chart. The Bucks' 34-point win is the second largest in a conference finals or division finals game after losing Game 1. Milwaukee has now won its last 3 playoff games, coming off a loss. Back to Mike Wilbon right here with yours truly. What did the Bucks do to Trae Young, and will it continue?
I don't think the Bucks did anything to Trae Young.
Really?
No. The Atlanta Hawks did that to themselves. I mean, we get on Milwaukee when they just sort of go absent, right?
Right.
That's what the Hawks did. And Milwaukee needed that. I mean, let's face it, you and I both thought there was going to be a beatdown last night, and there was a beatdown. Right. That was the most predictable result we're going to get out of this series. I expect the real series to begin tomorrow, Stephen A. Look, they gave more effort and energy and attention to Trae Young. There's no question about that.
Okay.
But I just negate everything we saw last night because I don't believe last night's result will have anything to do with the rest of the series going forward starting tomorrow.
I don't just negate it. When you get beat down like that, I got to pay attention to that. Especially, Mike, when you listen, I'm not going to get on him for shimmying or whatever because he's earned it. Right. He's been balling.
That's his
the
thing.
flip side to it, there's trees over there in Milwaukee. Drew Holiday's a big guard. Obviously, Chris Middleton is no shorty.
Yes.
All right, PJ Tucker is not a softie. Giannis is Giannis, and Brook Lopez looked relevant. I mean, I can't ignore that.
But you know they don't always play that way, and you know they might not play that way tomorrow night if we're talking about the Bucks.
If they do play that way, what can the Hawks do about it?
Not as much as they'd like to think. Look, it's on Milwaukee, Stephen A.
Right.
They came out, they flatlined Game 1. Then they got angry at themselves and probably angry at Atlanta, and they played last night like they're supposed to play. I don't mean the result, 30-plus points. I mean with that kind of effort and attention to detail. We don't know what. The one thing we've learned about Milwaukee over the last 3 years is their consistency is simply not there. I don't know what to expect from them tomorrow.
Yeah, I get all of that, but my flip side is this. I'm looking at Giannis and the level of aggression, and I'm saying Milwaukee said, look, we're big boys. We're the big boys in this series.
That's right.
Take it to the rack. Don't settle for threes. Take it to the hole. Get the high percentage shots and force them to have to make those threes in order to compete with us because we're going to shoot high percentage shots. We're going to make them.
Why do they go absent? Yeah. Why do they go away from everything you just said? Yeah. I don't trust them at all to go back to the formula that was so successful last night. We saw it in the previous series at times against Brooklyn. We saw it in the opening series when they swept.
Okay.
Stephen A.
I got you.
Can't trust the Bucks.
I understand. Can't trust the Bucks.
No,
but this
not yet.
It's side 1-1.
Not yet.
Anyway, I got to move on. The Clippers, remember that? They have never reached an NBA Finals, and if they're going to change that this postseason, they'll need a huge series from star Paul George. Kirk Goldsberry takes a closer look at PG-13 in this edition of Off the Charts.
As we've seen this postseason, Paul George is still one of the best scorers in the league, and if the Suns want to beat the Clippers, they'll need to slow him down. George can score from everywhere, but at 31, he now does the biggest share of his damage out here, beyond the three-point line. He made a staggering 53% of his corner threes this season. He can shoot from every angle, but his numbers get better the closer he gets to the corners. Nobody leaves PG in the corner. Moving inside the arc, George can hit pull-ups and fadeaways in the mid-range. He hit
47.4% of his 213 non-paint twos this year. That's not just way above league average, that's better than his teammate Kawhi Leonard's percentages in these areas.
He'll rise over the top, he got the foul call, he put it in! Paul George! Tonight, the man has been rated R.
I just dug into a place that I've been already in my career, come out and lead with the ball club.
George's paint numbers are surprisingly below league average, making just 60% of his shots in the restricted area this season. Kawhi shot 75% here. He may not be Kawhi, but Paul George is still the single most important scorer in this series.
Paul George is one of just 4 players to score 20-plus points in each of the first 16 playoff games over the last 20 years, along with Kevin Durant, Kobe Bryant, and Dwayne Wade. On the other side of the break,